Hi there. It's been a while, and hope you excuse me for looking not that fresh. Yeah, so it's New Year, and so yeah, it's been a while because it's been Christmas and New Year, and I've been away, and yeah, so I've not had time to do this really. I've not taken the time to do it at least, and I've been around people, so it's not been that convenient. So yeah, one change that has happened here for me is that I've decided to take my dog with me here in my apartment. For a while he was with my parents, and then since they bought a new dog, and because this one's old and we decided that it would be nice to have him. If they were going to buy a new one, it would be nice for them to be with each other for a while. And so, but now he's here because, yeah, I think at some level I feel it's my responsibilities, even though we bought the dog when I was about maybe 11 years old, and it was my dog. It was still not really as if I should have, like, for sure it was my dog and my responsibility, but I was 11 years old, so 12 maybe. But now it's my dog, and who knows, maybe not that many years left. Here he is, by the way. Hello there. So, what should I talk about? Lots of things are going through my mind right now. And yeah, this is quite. I could talk about a lot, and I probably will bump into a lot of these issues when I'm talking. But I'm sorry, but I have to bring this up again, and because it's so central of a topic, and it's really about what you do about your day, what you fill it with, and I've decided that it's probably a terrific thing to talk like this. But it could be that I don't know how much, maybe like, yeah, I don't know how much I should talk, and I think it's a good thing to practice to do, to speak a lot like I'm doing, but I also feel like there's an opportunity cost. What could I do instead? Like, for example, I think I don't know if it was the last video I did before I went to vacation during Christmas, or two before, but I had this sort of focus on. I got to the bottom of what was actually a good thing to do, what was appropriate time to spend your day, and I tried to get to a really rational conclusion, and part of that was that I maybe should have been more social, and for now I'm not sure how I came to that conclusion, and I am not more skeptical of it, but I won't say that it falls all right, because I don't know, but I could go into that and maybe figure out if that was my claim. I'm not 100% sure, but if I claim that I should be more social, then I should get to the bottom if that's correct. So another one I'm more confident with to say that it's actually the best thing to do is to learn the academic models in order to be more rational in life. So, and before I forget it, because it's so on my mind so much, I just listened to a video on YouTube, Charlie Munger, and he said about like investments and so forth, and made an emphasis, lots of things that make me not confused. What's the word? Yeah, but troubled. Shit, I look like a ghost. But he said that you should like have reasonable expectation, but it was mainly about investment. He said that there was a situation where a lot of companies, or the company tried to pick out the most able investors, the most insightful investors, really. And all these 100 or maybe even 1,000, I don't know, millions investors or bright people, they will take their best advice of stock options and trade on that. And so they thought that, well, that would be amazing. And he said, Charlotte Munger said that, well, that's a perfectly good thing to do if you're not well educated. Where all these people from Wharton and Harvard and places, most able people, and he said the reason was, and this he really said that no one in the audience could that he spoke to could know really what the answer was. Why did this work? And I thought for myself, like, what is the reason? And I'm not sure if I had a hint on what, but my answer was that they were not really rational, and there was no one in charge of the situation to take an academic model or so forth. But his answer was, and I guess you would come to that answer if you did that, what I just said, but his answer was that no one of them knew that you can't be the best in everything. Basically, if you take all the big ideas, or take the best ideas of everyone, and think you can be the best in every market, then you're too, well, he said that it's in some way too ambitious, or in some way he might say that it's not clear, like, oh, my dog is kind of playing. No. Well, he stopped. Maybe he's confused that I'm walking back and forth over him all the time. But that's his usual behavior. Yeah, so I lost my train of thought, but basically he says that the thing that they didn't grasp was that you can't be that so ambitious to think that you can just get everything right with all the right people, because you just have to. And he took this anecdote of when from his an idea that came from his, I think it was maternal grandfather, and that opportunities, you only get a few opportunities in life, really. And his mother also said that, but maybe didn't understand it as much as he did, or his grandfather, he said. That's, yeah. But the ideas is very important because, and I guess it's just about, that was going through my mind, right, when I got reminded about this video, that you only get a few opportunities in life, and that the distribution is really what determines. I guess that's the thing, like, it's just a probability function that of all the opportunities you get in life, there's a distribution. Of course, that has to be the case, and and you will get. And when I say opportunities, I just mean, well, you could see opportunities as events in life, and you will have probably like events. You can define it as really as a million events or a billion events. Like every second in your life, it's all events for sure. But it's the outliers that you have to make the right decision on. And so it's about, so yes, take a number, a million events in your life. Even though that's, yeah, who knows, at least a million interactions, I guess you have. I don't know the number, could calculate it, I guess, but and if you just take all those, if you take the top, like not even the top percent, but the top percentile, or is that a, no, percentile means, I mean not percentile, the top, what's it called in English, promille, like the millionth best, sort of, not the, I think it's 0.1% or something, but even you could make it smaller, but this concept is just that the best of them is like in the nature of reality really rare. And so if you if you bet good on those ones, then that's when you'll flourish, and you can't expect to get those opportunities all the time, and you don't really know when they will come. And you can be lucky and unlucky, but will still, as long as you're wise and have a good habit of mind to learn things, you have to bet on it when they can come. And actually, it reminds me of something that I'm not sure how much. Charlotte Munger is someone I deeply admire in many ways. I can't say I agree with everything he says because I haven't made up my mind on everything that he speaks about, but I really admire him and come to similar conclusions on the topics that I do have come to a conclusion to, or am on track towards the conclusions. But another guy that I've been talking about is Tai Lopez, and he's more difficult for me to for several reasons, but one thing he said was that it's like a slot machine, and you have two slot machines, and you know that one of them will give you a reward. I think this was the case, that it wasn't exactly like this, but you will get, say, okay, we'll put it like this. The right slot machine will give you 50 if you're lucky. Let's say it's just a 50% chance on both machines. On the right machine, you will get $5,000 if it's the right, if it's slot on one side of the 50%, and if you, what did I say, $5,000, but if you lose, you will be robbed $5,000. And if on the left machine, you will get $10,000 if you get it right, 50%, and the other 50% you will lose $5,000. So again, the right is $5,000 50% win and $5,000 50% to lose, and the left is $10,000% to win and $5,000 to lose 50%. So it's obvious better to take the left machine if you have to choose. And so if you choose the left machine and you lose $5,000, should you switch to the right? No, of course you shouldn't. If you bet on the left like 5 times and you lose every single time and you're sure it's 50%, it's not about the machine's workings or something. You really know that you're just bad luck, and you should still not choose the right machine because it's still the better odds, even though that you have lost lots of times. It's still the better odds to bet on the left. And the moral of that story is that I associate it with that it's not necessarily the case that you get a reward just because you're doing something right. And so I connected with those opportunities that Charlotte Munger talks about, that doing the right thing will not always give you results. But it's also sort of another concept that I have to bring to mind is that that could be used as a justification for continuing what's not working. And that's another thing that, by the way, Tai Lopez is really big on, to experiment. And he likes to quote, I think it's, likes to quote many people, but one of the person he quotes is, who said it, that I think it was Einstein, that insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And that's really something he says in order to back up his claim that experimentation is really essential in life, and if not, something is not working, you have to change things. And it's in line, and I even think he's got support for his conviction by reading Charlotte Munger, because Charlotte Munger says adopt. Whatever happens in life, you have to adopt. At least that was said in his book, and someone summarizing him in his own book. Or his, that Kaufman, a guy, he never wrote his own book, Charlotte Munger, but lots of his speeches. But in one section, there's about to adapt to new circumstances. But I'm not sure that that's Charlotte Munger's own word. But yeah. Anyway, so it's hard for me to get that, how much you should adopt and change. How much of your circumstances should you take as an indication for that it's not working, if nothing has really happened, or that if nothing is, that you're doing the right thing, but just because you're betting on the right thing, it's not necessarily the case that really, really rare opportunity will come. I mean, you could still do the right thing, but nothing is happening, right? And that's what I'm trying to figure out, really, here, I guess. And it's connected with what I do every day and so on and so forth. And so it's perseverance to keep on doing, but it's still questioning if, yeah, that's the dilemma, I guess. But so, and going back to what I brought up before Christmas about about academic models and so forth. I actually had some really productive days, I think. I did study this book that I rented, or not rented, but borrowed from library, actually. What's it called in English? Sort of the state library, or the, anyway. And so I did study a lot of academic models, or rather and so during some days I went really deep into it, studied many hours, and some days I didn't really have time for it, or one can argue that I wasted time, or that I couldn't have made better use of my day. And so a good exercise would be to investigate what I could have done better today, because I haven't studied yet, and I'm not motivated to study academic models today. And I did come to the conclusion, I think, never mind. I did come to the conclusion that it probably would have been the right thing to study 3.5 hours a day the last 1.5 years, and before that probably 1 hour a day. And that I then obviously should study 3.5 hours a day today, this topic, academic models. and there's some reluctance in me to that. And I guess yeah, I mean, I wrote something down before Christmas that I think was really related, or even put same thing put in different words, that, and it was about education, that a child who does not have a parent who pushes the child towards education or school, really, if that child is really gifted and rational, should he study without any, I mean, without knowing that it's right to study? Should he study? What I mean is, can he arrive at a rational justification for studying without should? Well, it's the difference between should and what I mean is that if he is not insightful enough and don't have the evidence for that studying is good, he shouldn't really study, because he don't know that it is the right thing to do. But provided that he do know, or if he come to the conclusion by rational sort of justification for it, then he should study. But my point is really that, so, and I don't want to make it, I want to be careful not make it an argument for not studying, in this case, academic models, because I know that I could have that tendency, because I don't think it's that fun all the time. So what I'm trying to figure out is, or my point is, because I realize when I'm starting to talk about it, I get somewhat more motivated, or at least less demotivated. And I guess the thing is that if you have your clarity in mind that this is something important and good, then you will do it. But if you don't have a rational justification for why and not reminded of it, you might lose faith in the, and that's another thing that comes up in my mind that is demotivating. And I try to keep 2000. My main thread here is that I want to arrive to a rational justification for doing academic models a certain amount of hours, and maybe today how much I should do. But the sidetrack here is that when I did, or is a part of that rational investigation, because when I did study, and it has happened now and then that I feel, one issue is that I'm just, okay, that's a separate issue, but I've read the summaries and so forth and just consumed, sort of get a hold of, did some study techniques that is recommended, but not really as focused on just doing it fast as I hoped I could do, like summarize academic models and then just go on. I did more thoroughly, but maybe I wasted time, and that's something that confuses me and makes me, yeah, how should I approach it? I don't know. And another sidetrack of that is I thought about, well, if you do it hyper-productive in 30 minutes and then retrospect on what you did in 30 minutes, and then the rest 8 hours of a day you just think about what you should do, then that's a lot worse than studying 9 hours a day and just dedicate yourself to that. Although it depends on what the opportunity cost is for the rest 8 hours, because if you have good rational justification, and okay, so it's sorry, I'm just confused by that. I try to keep up the main thread here, but the sub-main thread was that that I've felt sometimes that, especially when I study economics, I felt that these economic models, I had some, I never really had, or oftentimes I remained skeptical, or there were bursts of skepticism. That's a better way to put it, because it was not that often. It was just somewhat boring, but sometimes I really get a burst of skepticism and towards the author's insight of the world and the usefulness of doing it. Just keep studying, and that was somewhat based on maybe a narcissistic inclination that I'm not saying I'm narcissistic, I don't know really, but we are all to some degree for sure, but I thought that there's so many interesting subjects in the world, and I feel that I have a hint on some things that are insightful that people don't talk about, but I can't know for sure. And when I studied these economic models, it felt, and I also had in mind what Eric Weinstein has talked about. It's not Harvey Weinstein, just to be clear about that. But Eric Weinstein, a friend of Peter Thiel, the one founding PayPal to with Elon Musk and so forth. But Peter Thiel's friend Eric Weinstein said that in an interview, a really good one at the Portal. It's a podcast, not like any other podcast. That's just a jolly conversation about topics, and but he said that the assumptions in economics are not really that. Like, how could you even know? And it's connected with this behavioral economics, I guess, that if you're too rational about how could people be so rational so that you could provide a view of the world with this supply and demand and so forth. So I became skeptical when I had that in mind, because I did know when I did study economics, I felt I didn't really like all the assumptions, and it was not really that much of a discussion about them, and there was not something off. And something off is not always an indication of how good the theories are. It could also be the educational and pedagogic way of portraying things, and so I can't know really for sure, but I had some difficulties with the assumptions. And again, Eric Weinstein said that if you hang up on some issues in some academic context of textbooks and so forth, he said those students that did get hung up on issues, he would hang up on the same issues, and it's an indication that your mind is actually working right rather than wrong to get, is that the expression, to hang up? Anyway, hang up, I use that, I guess you understand. Just get confused about these things are a way for you to, it's a skeptical mind, and that's probably good. That's the way I think he's pointing at. And that made me confused in how much should I just absorb and take for given everything that's given in the academic models, especially economics, which is somewhat more. But if I guess I'm not enough well educated in this, because if I knew how much these models were used in the world and how good they worked, if they did work good, then I would. But one thing that got me confident again was that when I saw an application of supply and demand, and especially elasticity, they made an argument that was the exact same thing that Charles Munger used as an example And that made me more to rely on his, because what he said was that if a farmer, not Charlemagne, but in the book, if a farmer in a economy with, let's see, with low elasticity in price, which usually is quite high demand, and it was like wheat, for example. It's not that much fluctuance in quantity sold, and this is for demand. I think it was the same for supply for some reason, and I think that's quite accurate. But if you change the price in wheat, it's not that much of an alteration in the quantity demanded, because it's so, you just need it, wheat, and the consequence of that really you have supply and demand, which is a cross sort of, and depending on the slope determines how much the price is altered and so forth. And since the price was quite larger, low effect. No, actually, sorry. No, that's true. So and yeah. So since the price, since the good is inelastic, it indicates that, and that's a general truth in academic model. If the price is inelastic, then raising the price is what gives you more revenue, and lowering the price is what gives you less, and that you can figure that out from the graphs and so forth. And in this case, so if you have an invention in technology in farming, what practically happens is that supply goes up, and the consequences of supply going up in this scenario in the graph is that price goes down more than quantity goes up, because the graph is inelastic, and that's congruent with that, and it's the same thing basically, that total revenue goes down because of that, the total revenue. And it's quite unintuitive, because you would think that a technology change in farming would make the farmer better off, but, and I think this is the reason for that this works, is that since it's a competitive market, the better technology will incentivize more, and that's basically the reason, and it's really in line with, at least if you think about it correctly, that what Peter Thiel says, that if you're starting a business, you actually want to strive for monopoly, and competitive markets is not really that place you want to be in, and farming is definitely the case, because if you adopt an invention that, and this is the key, that everyone else as farmers does, which is the case for many farm practices, for sure, if you can keep something a secret, that's good. But since the relative, you don't really get a competitive advantage or an absolute advantage either. You don't get that advantage because everyone is adopting that technology betterment, and so since you don't get better than everyone else in the competitive market, you can't keep the price up. The price will go down in the same way as the cost did, because you're able to, because that's the case with the competitive markets. If you raise your margins by lowering your costs, if everyone else in the competitive market does the same, then it will be competitive in price, and that's the thing with competitive markets. So it will, the whole I'm not sure that makes sense, but I guess I'm understanding better anyway. And so and now I understand why Charlemagne said that he had I think it was in the textile industry or something like that. And what he said was really that, sorry, I just have to. textile industry, or no, it wasn't really, but it was some industry and an investment in a technology. From the salesperson would say, well, if you buy this technology here, you will get this much of an increase in, and so on and so forth. But Charlie Munger said that no, that's not the case, and he probably had this in his mind, that if you implement this technology, everyone else will, or they will anyway, and you won't really gain anything from it. You will actually lose money investing in the technology. And but I guess if you're in that scenario, it's still better to do it, and the earlier the better, because at least for a while the price will be up, so you will. But in the long run, you have to calculate the, and I guess it will be an increase anyway, or a decrease in profit anyway. But you can't do anything about it, because if you don't, you're even worse, in an even worse situation, I think, because. And I guess the right thing to do in that situation, I don't know exactly what Charlie Munger's conclusion was, that, but I guess he said that if you're still in the business, you have to buy the technology. That's not what he said, but I think that's at least the conclusion I come to. But the best thing would maybe be to sell the business before that, because if someone does not understand that, then they will probably pay more for the farm than what it's worth. But I guess that's the more ad hominem, or the more not so pleasant reality of business, that on every transaction, every time you buy a company, someone is in some sense losing out, because they're not buying it. But that's trading on information, I guess. But anyway, but who knows if, yeah, I don't know. But it's still interesting that, so I actually got an implementation of that, and it's one part of my mind says, and this is probably not the rational part, but somewhere in my mind, and this has happened before, that I started to doubt Charlie Munger. Another time I did was when he said that we don't claim to be perfectly rational or perfectly moral. We have a lot of things that is below us, but we're not perfectly moral, and that may be, yeah. But I think there were other reasons too. But in this case, I started to think that, well, what if he just thinks that he is rational? What if he happened to use that model and think it works? What if, this is a scary thought, and I don't think, maybe it triggers my skeptical mind too much. And this is what Tai Lopez talks about. He says about about cynicism, and it's really hard, because it's quite Machiavellian to think that someone has bad intention and tries to manipulate you. But if that is the case, you will be taken into advantage, and one person who wants to manipulate you will say that you're just cynical, and that's the. So it's if people are Machiavellian, you better be Machiavellian. But if people are not, you better be not. At least, in my opinion. But anyway, I think in the long run, even if people are Machiavellian, yeah, I don't think being Machiavellian is the best thing. But you might be somewhat more cynical, at least rational. But anyway, it's hard to I don't know what I base this on, but these supply curves and demand curves and the conclusions from them, I guess my thing is that since there are people who are skeptical about them, like Rick Weinstein, well, he never really say he is, but he says there are more. And even Charlotte Munger says this too, that behavior is probably good to take into account psychology when doing economics. And for sure, the demand and supply curves will not be exactly the same. But the question is, I guess that the conclusion that must be in Charlotte Munger's brain must be that they are in general right about the farmer and so on and so forth. But there are alterations which makes us not perfectly rational, which is what we assume in supply and demand curves and so forth, usually, I guess. And so maybe that's the case, that they are in broad useful and correct. Now I have sorted that out by doing this video, which could be an indication that it is the right thing to do these videos and studying, and that I don't come to, it really feels as if I sort things out when I talk about these things, because now I have handled one obstacle for me, and the obstacle was really that I wasn't really sure that academic models or economic academic models are that useful, but now I'm more confident that they really are. Now the next issue is, well, one thing is how much should I do, how much of it should I do today, but before that I want to address one thing that I haven't maybe I have come to a conclusion, but I want to be more confident, and that is about how to study. Because what I've been doing, as I said, for a while, I just I read the conclusions, and by the way, this was basically on the assumption that it's not really about how effective you study, it's much more about how much you study in the long run, and that I maybe was somewhat delusional to think that I studied as much as I thought when I was studying at Stockholm School of Economics. I think I've talked about it earlier, that I thought of myself as being very diligent and doing stuff right and so on and so forth. But when I took into consideration the time traveled and that I had a reason to think that I should rest somewhat more on, I'm not sure that it was that many hours a day actually. And so the question is, did I really get, sometimes I thought of it as maybe I studied, well, I'm a guy who studies like 80 hours a week or something like that. Even though I studied during the weekends quite a lot, I think, I still don't think that maybe it wasn't more than, in worst case, I mean, absolute worst case, how much did I study a day, including weekends or during a week? A day I probably, at worst case, only studied 4 hours a day. That's not much at all. Best case could have been that I was up at 10, 11, 12 hours a day, and that's not really that much if I think about it. Like, I wanted to think of myself someone who studied all the time, but who knows, many people probably did study 16 hours a day or more. Almost. I couldn't do it unless I had long public traffic and transport, but I could have done it simultaneously, and I actually did later on. But anyway, so it's really an issue for me how much I should study and how I should study. Because what I did for a while was that it maybe only was 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. I read the conclusions and I went through the, what's it called, the table of contents and all the big themes in the book, and just go through it many times, which I've learned is a good way to study. But I also was skeptical because it was very passive learning, and I started to repeat somewhat what I later on, but that was only later on. And then finally I decided that, well, it's probably not, and it was similar to the conclusion that I came to when I was thinking about just summarize the basic things about the models. Then I could do one model a day. That's like easy, I thought. And it was also a thought that I had, that should I really do every academic models in the economics textbook, but what I started to do instead for doing the summaries, and actually instead of doing, like, I just thought that pure diligence in reading the broad texts, like start to read from the beginning and do the exercises, which was recommended in the book by the author himself, which Schollemonger to a certain extent admires. And what the author suggested was to really read and summarize what you read, and then do the exercises, which is basically a good way to study, I guess, but because summarizing is more active, so it's the retrospecting thing about it. But I did that, and there's still a high level of, this is just theory, I don't know how to practice this, even though, and I guess that's why Schollemonger says that he oftentimes compares to, well, the ideal he has of education is his take the good of this is worth repeating, actually, or I don't know if it's right, but I hope I'm somewhat rational. He says that he suggests that, he says that, he says like this, and yes, I actually do think that mighty Harvard have something to learn about have something to learn from pilot training, and what his thesis is, or his claim is, which I really do agree about it. It's so congruent to the, what he called the use it or lose it tendency, one of his psychological biases that he talks about. And so, his point is really that it's not enough to get an A on an exam. You have to ingrain the models in your head and use it on every day in your life, and that's really what I'm experiencing here. I'm reading the models and can do the questions, but have I ingrained the models so that I'm actually actively using it every day, most of the time at least, every day, or a large part of my week, using that model to applicate it to my life. And here's the key, because he says about, such as pilot simulation, the good thing about pilot simulation, the first thing before getting to using it every day in your life, is that they have to repeat. He takes pilot training because it has high demands on being really good at what you do, get it to high fluency using checklists, which is really a big fan of Schillemunger, using checklists in order to see that you have considered every aspect or checked everything so that is as it should be. And if you don't do all these things really good, there's a catastrophe, like a plane crash that will happen. So why pilot training is so good as a model is not necessarily because it's so advanced in, well, it's advanced in some sense, but it's not like intellectual level, but the practicality of it's really the demand in the situation that forces you to do everything really good. That's the thing in pilot training, because since you have a situation where it really is life and death situation, if you crash a plane, demands that you check everything that you have to know, even though it's really rare that it will happen. You check everything, and so we have everything, and the equivalence is checking every basic piece of knowledge in a checklist type. And so, and one thing they do in pilot training is that they continually have to go through a simulation machine in order to keep the knowledge fresh. And I think they even have tests for making sure that they know about their knowledge long after, and maybe that's incorporated in the simulation machine and so forth. But and here's how you apply it to everyday life, is that reading, I think, newspapers, and I think it's called Chronicles, maybe I got that wrong, but newspapers and like these type of, I forgot the name for it, but more simple newspapers and so forth. The Economist maybe, or even though that's not business, only but Fortunes and Entrepreneur magazine maybe, I don't know. That forces you to, at least in business, that's your simulation machine really, because it's not necessarily that you trade on everything that, but it simulates the environment, and it forces you to, and that's the environment in which you can apply these models. So when I'm reading this book, what it's lacking is, what I am lacking at least, is the applicability to everyday life and how I could. But it actually is a good question in the end of the first, not the first, but the first sort of theory chapter about supply demand, that go to, for example, The Economist and try to apply one of these complex, I think, no, it's actually introductory chapter maybe, about principles. Try to apply these principles. It's basically the principles of academic models. I think I talked about it earlier. And yes, so yeah. So the question is, should I read those type of chronicles maybe? Should I? How many newspapers should I read? How many? Yeah, that's worth considering and thinking about. Probably I should. The question is, I'm not really, how much should I focus on business? How much should I focus on other things? And how much should I? And I guess that's why Schillemunger and Warren Buffett speaks about, what's it called? Reading a lot. It's not only reading academic models, it's also presented get presented with content in the everyday world, businesses and so forth. But one part of me wants to say that it's a high opportunity cost, but at the same time, reading all day, like, yeah. So that was a sidetrack or a really interesting thing. about applicability and so forth. And what I think is that I think about what I listened to another YouTube video where they talked Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett said that it was a question of someone like a really high ability, maybe probably genetic and so forth, and what should I do? And Warren Buffett said, among other things, he said that, yeah, you for sure have to read 8, if you read like 8 to 10 hours a day, read and think 8 to 10 hours a day. And he never said that focused on just investing, but the question was about investing, and maybe Warren Buffett is doing just that, like 10 or 8 to 10 hours a day, just reading about investment opportunities. You will go through so many so that you will be able to spot the really good ones, but you have to be wise enough to not just act, to know that it's really rare when the good opportunities comes. So I actually have to put on my, what's it called in English, sweatshirt? No, my shirt. But so, and my reluctance to, and considering the opportunity cost, maybe it is the case that doing that is so good that the opportunity cost of doing something else is lower, and that's why I should do it. Or the case is that that my opportunity cost is too high to do that. And certainly if I'm not sure that being the best in business is the best thing I want to do, like investing, because I'm not sure that's the thing I want to do with my life, then it's hard to know how much I should focus on it. But at the same time, it's still important to have the academic models in your head in order to, and how can I really achieve like using the academic models in my head without doing business chronicles and so forth. Not as good as if I do it, but I still have to use them every day or most of the day, every week. And I think the obvious answer to the question is well, maybe I could be really good at it and get motivated, but there's so many things that I have. It's hard because it goes back to some of my motivations in life. I really want to do. I want to do big things. I don't know how much I can do, but it's not that related to making money, even though on some level making money makes you contribute to society in some ways, but it's really an ideological question about left and right, and left is more like if you have money, you have not necessarily earned them, you could have manipulated and not sold something that is really that good for people to buy. And well, the right is more like the more you have money, the more value you have provided. In some senses it's true, but it's a complicated question. But anyway, I think there are some things in society and in life that are not as good as they could be, and I'm sort of in line with with Peter Thiel and Eric Weinstein on that, getting, I think, like the best, brightest mind in society to guide them or get them to do really good things is probably very valuable, but it's about partly to get the passion going and also to direct them to things that are useful and not just direct them like, because in order for someone to direct, it's easier to do that if you know a lot and are broad enough. But if you're young, for sure you need direction, but you also need that apparatus which makes the advisor able to help them in their direction, and that maybe necessitates a broad knowledge, and so you can't just channel all your energy to one issue without learning other academic models and so forth. Like, for example, if you're determined to cure cancer, you can't just do cancer things. You have to do other medicine and other academic models probably in order to think good. But yeah, it's the dilemma, sort of, or paradox, whatever you want to call it, the trade-off between specialization and the man with a hammer syndrome, basically meaning that you get really good at one thing, or you have to sacrifice being good at one thing so that you're just when you overuse that special knowledge, which happens when you torture your reality to fit your models in just your academic discipline and so forth. And so, so what I try to get at here is, how do I form my day in order to learn academic models, their application, get the simulation machine right for applications, and I guess one aspect of it is, because I started to think about habits, and is it good to get all in like 10 hours? It certainly feels like, whoa, no, not that. But at the same time, if I'm sure, it's not only that it feels bad, it's also that I'm not sure it is the right thing to do. Do I have rational justification for that? Someone, the gut feeling is right, sometimes it's wrong, but I guess the reason why I gut feeling is that it's not the right thing is because it's the opportunity cost. What should I do instead? Maybe I should start with saying that 3.5 hours every day doing academic models is probably a really good thing to do. So 3.5 hours, that's not that much, even though for now it feels quite good because it's almost 3 o'clock, and that would mean I'm not even finished when it's 6:30. And then I also have to get out with the dog and so forth, so I won't be finished until maybe 8 o'clock. But maybe that's good for motivation. If I decide, and it's also a trade-off here, because I realize if I'm going to do 3.5 hours today, which I actually think would be a good thing, and I'm somewhat motivated actually to do it now, because I know that I will appreciate the reward afterward. Like maybe I could watch a movie, or I could do whatever I want to do after that. But the trade-off here is continuing on this video or going all in that. And well, maybe suppose I started doing 14:43 is the time. 14, well, it means almost 3 p.m. in your English time. That means if I started at 3, I would be finished at 6:30. I won't do it in that order, but I also I have to feed my dog, I have to get out with him, I have to get back, and I have to eat. Well, I could eat at the same time and doing my reward, but I also want to do the reward after I'm finished reading. And let's say feeding my dog, getting out with him takes an hour, because I also know I need to train. Well, I haven't decided exactly how because I want to exercise at the same time when I'm getting out with him, but I haven't figured out exactly how to do that. But let's say it takes about 30, like 40 minutes. And the time is 7:10, like 7:20. Sorry if this is boring to listen to, but 7:07. And no, 7:20. Well, that's not that bad, actually. No. Yeah. It's just... To be honest, the issue here is that I am... well, this could work. Some things I'm thinking about is, the trade-off of continuing this video, because I think it's really useful to get this idea straight. And it's also the issue that I don't know how I would take the reward. I don't know what to reward myself with exactly, but... And it's also another thing, which is that I don't feel as if I'm exhausted in some sense. I'm not exhausted, but I feel like tired. But it's probably a good thing to study. But I also do know that rest is good, and sometimes I really need it. But another thing in my head says pushing on is good. I don't know how to think about this. I seriously don't know. Because I am more tired today than I usually are. And it's been this feeling for quite a while. And one reason for it, well, the best way to think about it is probably this, that yes, I am tired, I probably need to rest somewhat. I don't know how much. And maybe I won't do 3.5 hours today. But I will do at least 2.5 hours. But what I think now is that I need some rest. Maybe just 5 minutes. So maybe I'll be able to do 3.5 hours. Who knows? But I've too strong a conviction that has grown during the years is that when something tells me that you don't work, there is something that is, I probably get worse off by pushing harder. But the thing here is also that I think that when that is not the case, when I'm not exhausted, I often use that to a certain extent as a justification for not pushing, where I actually should push. But now I do have a feeling that is not not that often happening. It happens when I've pushed quite hard in some sense for a while, and I won't go into it, but so I should be careful of only pushing. But yeah, it's a hard trade-off because I also want to do what's right. I don't want to be lazy and not doing good work. It's really hard to know. But anyway, this video was interesting and good for me to do, and I will keep up with this practice. It's really, really useful. And if it wasn't for doing this 2.5 or 3.5 hours, I probably would continue, because I then wouldn't be sure that I could rest after doing it. But now I know I want to do that too, so it really, I know I had to rest, but it's really a trade-off continuing this and doing academic models. And if I know, yeah, I've still done this, so I still think it's the right thing, and I can't be 100% rational about and everything. I don't have enough insight, I guess, but it's fairly rational too. I could continue, I could not. But yeah, I think the most important is to do it again tomorrow or the following days at least. So thank you for listening, and see you next time.